you make some good points about this whole thing about the ethical reasons for becoming more plant based or vegan, I suppose. And I do agree with you on some point. I do disagree with you on some points. Something I do strongly disagree with you on, though, is the harassment and the protests. Um, what do you, what is the point? I suppose it's a completely ridiculous question, but what is the point of actually harassing people? Because in my eyes, and I think in many other people's eyes, it people get to really dislike the cause because of the harassment. And I get it is a really good way to create awareness for it. I just think in the long term, people will get really turned off to the cause.
So yeah, just to firstly kind of dive in, maybe I don't want to say correction, but like harassment is a term that gets chucked a lot around by the tabloid and right-wing media. But Animal Rebellion, alongside groups like Extinction Rebellion I mentioned, and another very large one, Just Stop Oil, are sort of strictly committed to non-violence, whether that is in our actions or the way we communicate. So like whilst a lot of media might try and convey this idea about harassment, that's simply not true. Non-violence is at the core of everything that we
But would you
do.
not consider it harassment if someone spray painted your house or walked into your house and poured milk on your floor?
I would, but that's never happened.
That
Animal Rebellion has never walked into someone's house and
no,
poured
but
milk
in a
on their floor.
store, right?
Yeah, that's different though.
It's different? How
If you allow
so?
me to explain,
A store is technically private property, right?
kind of, I know. Short answer for me is like I see a distinction between personal property and private property. So,
Of
for
course,
example,
yeah. But do you not still consider it harassment to walk into a store and pour their milk on the floor?
no, I wouldn't. I mean, harassment. I I think it is a technically an offence in law in England. Um, I'd have to look that up to get an exact description. But consists of doing something that is targeted at upsetting or distressing some individual, right?
Did okay? I don't want to get too technical about it,
Yeah.
but did I don't know if you did it or your fellow mates did it, but did you purchase the milk yourself and then poured it?
No, no, the milk wasn't purchased, but I think what
So
kind
isn't
of doesn't
that
get
technically
shown,
stealing and destroying
yeah,
destroying property? So isn't
yeah,
that
and we've been perfectly open about that. We've never, made an attempt to hide that that's what happened. And everyone that's done those actions, whether they were arrested or not, did so in a full knowledge of the potential consequences. There was no blindness going into them. Um, and what I would say is, what doesn't get shown, obviously, we see everything through the lens of the media that we are looking at. What doesn't get shown is the person who is calmly speaking to members of staff and explaining what's happening, apologizing for the disruption to their working day, and making sure they're aware of the situation. This isn't about them as individuals, it's about the system that we're in. And that's what oftentimes doesn't get shown by the mainstream media, is that there is a constant thread of communication. And, it's not, for example, going in balaclavas and smashing everything to bits. There is this constant communication there of, why it's happening and what's happening.
but I don't think it justifies it apologizing afterwards. If I help an old lady across the road, that doesn't mean I can kill her afterwards, right? Just because you apologize or do a good action after doing a bad action, I don't see it justified
I'd
personally.
say for me that's a bit of a false analogy. That is quite misleading. And what I would say is an analogy is look at the sheer scale of the climate and ecological emergencies versus the actions that have been taken to bring a public conversation around it, aim to engender policy change. When you look at it that way, I think is a more appropriate balance of doing something that, yes, breaks the law, but is aimed at engineering something that is undeniably of good to every life on this planet. And I'm like, I'm not trying to shy away from the accountability and responsibility for these actions because they do cause upset. They do cause people to be very angry and frustrated and outraged. I'm not trying to shy away from that, but I am trying to say that the manner in which they're done is not to target any individuals, and they are done with a very clear objective beyond mere disruption in mind.
Of course. I completely get that there's an actual. Yeah, I do believe you guys genuinely mean good. I disagree with the method. I recently read this book, and it's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And it's about how you can influence people to comply, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a chapter in there that states a lot of, and it's pretty obvious as well. I think if a person likes you, they're more likely to comply with a request. So, do you not find that people dislike your cause more by these disturbances?
So people may take a dislike to the cause, but one thing that recent YouGov polling has shown is that the big worry is, oh, people dislike your group, so they're going to dislike the message. That's false. That's a false narrative. In fact, there's actually been a rise of people who are concerned about the climate crisis or seriously concerned about the climate crisis. That does correlate with like a significant public dislike of some groups involved. I mean, it's like we can look at like examples in history where the message has succeeded whilst groups have been unpopular.
Mm.
So let's look at the suffragettes and the campaign for women to get the vote in the UK, right? A lot of the actions that the suffragettes undertook, both violent and non-violent, by the way, I'm not going to try and whitewash that particular part of history, meant that they were intensely disliked group. But if you look at the success of their message, I think that's undeniable, right? Eventually, women of a certain social standing were able to get the vote. And then after much more campaigning, that was extended to women of all social backgrounds, right? And then, look at the civil rights movement in America. In 1961, Martin Luther King is the most hated man in the United States, right?
Really?
Yeah, 100%. He was detested by the majority of the population of the US. And amongst them are what he dubbed as the white moderates, which was the group of people he said were actually the ones inhibiting change. It was the people. I'm not trying to call you one of these people, right? I'm just trying to hark back to something that's like solidly in history. Martin Luther King's opinion was that it was the individuals who were saying, I 100% agree with your message, but it's not the right time for it. We need to think about other things. We need to use other methods. In his opinion, those were the people that were inhibiting progress the most. So I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had about the tactics used, whether that's damaging property, whether it's blocking roads, etc. But I do firmly stand by that tactics like those, non-violent direct action, are and can be extremely effective in the success of the message, even at the detriment of the popularity of it in any given group.